This NFL Week 5 edition of the Propcast is brought to you by, just going through the order here, Underdog Fantasy. Sign up the promo code SGPN to get a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. We're also brought to you by Rhythm. Start crushing college football and the NFL with Rhythm. Get your setting future all today. Look to sportscampus.com/RATHMM. And welcome, everybody, to the Week 5 NFL live stream edition of the Propcast. I'm your special guest host for this episode, Scott Reichel. Munaf was busy, I guess, or too popular, so he couldn't make it this week. So I'm filling in, and of course, Lonte is here once again to go into our favorite plays for the actual prop portion of the NFL slate. Now, Lonte, we are one game or half of one game in, and the Jets actually scored a touchdown. So we'll see if they can make the game more interesting, but they're currently down 7-17. Did you have any props in that game at all?
No, I didn't. I didn't have anything. I just didn't know what type of game flow. I didn't know what was going to be going on, so I just kind of stayed away. What about you?
Yeah, I don't have anything either. I woke up and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, the Jets are losing. Yeah, okay, cool. Sounds about right. So no, I didn't have any action on it, but that is one less game we are going to cover on the show because, of course, we have the international game, second one of the year, first one in London because we had the game in Brazil a couple weeks ago between the Eagles and the Packers. Either way, though, you want to just get into the actual card?
Yes, sir. Let's do it.
All right, so I'm going to pick a game at random. I'll actually go according to ESPN, so whichever order they have. First game we're going to talk about is a fun one between the Panthers and the Bears. Yeah, that's the first game we're going to talk about. All right, so for this matchup, you have a tale of really two different quarterback dynamics here because the Panthers benched the really bad rookie quarterback, and Andy Dalton's been fine. Now, Thielen got injured, and we know Deontay Johnson has been really good. Chuba got going last week on the ground, so we'll see if that continues. But for the Bears, they've been winning some games. We don't really know how, but they actually have a couple wins this season. Caleb has been pretty underwhelming as the number one pick, but he is, once again, a rookie, and there are some growing pains involved. But you are looking at the offense. I know that Swift woke up last week. He had himself a great game. Rashawn Johnson did have a touchdown last week. But for the sake of this matchup, are there any props you actually like, or are you expecting this game to just be so ugly that you're not going to waste your time?
Yeah, I like one on each side. So I've been completely wrong about Swift this entire year. Me and Munaf were on his unders last week, but we were on his overs in the weeks prior and just went 0 for 3 or 4, however many games they played. But I think I'm back in. I'm back in on over 52.5 rushing yards, minus 120. He had 16 for 94 last week. If you look at some of the success that the running backs have had versus Carolina, Chase Brown had 80, 51 for Moss last week. Dobbins 141, Edwards 59, Kamara 82, and they're dealing with some. They're pretty much front seven is beat up linebacker core and defensive line core. So I think Swift can get the ball a ton. I don't know if they're going to want Caleb to throw. I think they still got the training wheels on Caleb, so he's kind of just dinking and dunking his way unless something's open. So I'm going over 52.5 rushing yards for DeAndre Swift. And on the other side, I like Xavier Legette over 45 receiving yards, minus 120. Secondary weapons have been, decent versus Chicago. Jalen Johnson likely to be shadowing Deontay Johnson, so opportunities should be there. If you look at what Whittington did last week, he had 62. And Legette's been better since Thielen's been down. He had 4 for 35 on 7 targets.
He had a touchdown last week. So.
Yeah. Just going through his log, he had 4 for 35. On 7 targets. He was targetless in week 2, 2 for 42 on 3 targets in week 3. And then last week he had 6 for 66, but most importantly, he had 10 targets. So underneath stuff, I think Legette can get one. He's more like a Deebo Samuel type. Ironically, they both went to South Carolina. So those are the two that I like in this game.
Yeah, the main concern I have for the actual props in this game for pass catchers is the insane amount of wind we're expecting for this game. Yeah. Got to mention the weather report. You're looking at wind gusts of around 25 miles per hour for basically the entirety of the game. So I'm not expecting many deep shots. If you want to maybe go for longest completion under for these quarterbacks, I don't necessarily mind it because I wonder how many deep shots they're going to take with regard to the wind. But there is one player I do like on the Bears to go over his receiving yards number, and that's Cole Kmet. He's at 26.5, which I think is pretty low. He has had at least 27 in 3 straight games, had 97 against the Colts a couple weeks ago. But you're looking at Kmet and his overall usage, and of course, he's the number 1 tight end on the roster. He has been getting some targets, and you are looking also at the Panthers against the tight end position. They have been a little bit below average, but they also have a bunch of injuries to the linebacking core, as Thompson has an Achilles injury and Jewell's going to be out. They are down a couple of linebackers, and I do think that should open the door for Kmet. But even with the bad wind, I think Kmet makes a lot of sense because a lot of his stuff is kind of underneath anyway, or in the intermediate, I should say, depth in terms of his actual targets. So I don't mind Kmet maybe getting 3 or 4 targets for like 30 yards. But I find that this prop's a bit low for a guy that's gone over in 3 straight, and the Panthers' linebacking core is completely decimated. So I actually like Kmet to go over his receiving yards in that one. But with the wind, once again, it is pretty tricky to fully love a bunch of, I'd say, a lot of pass catchers in this game to go over their yards. But I do want to quickly pull up what Caleb's longest completion is, because I actually like the under on that market. Caleb's longest completion, if I could find it. Sorry, trying to find it. Longest pass completion, 34.5. He has gone under in 3 of the first 4 games of the season. I'm on the under. He had 1 over. That was against the Colts. But with the wind, with them playing outdoors, and I wonder if the Bears are going to lean to their defense a bit more and maybe just, try to trust their defense in the wind. I think their defense is very good. So I wonder if they might be even more careful with Caleb to make sure he doesn't blow the game, kind of like what Levis did against them in week 1. So I think you're looking at the Bears probably having a more conservative approach in this game in the bad weather, and I think that might be the way to go. But if you like Swift, if you like Roshan, maybe you want the carries over because you might end up seeing them lean more into the run game. So you just keep that in mind. But I could see the weather being ugly, which might play a factor into this game. Moving on to the next one, you have a game that sounds like it could be a Sunday night or a Monday night game. You have the Ravens against the Bengals, so we do ramp up the quality of play quite a bit here. Now, Baltimore is favored by 2.5 on the road, and the over-under is around 48.5. For this matchup, though, the Bengals beat the Panthers last week, their first win of the season, after killing 2 of my survivor entries, and you have the Ravens, who woke up and beat the Bills handily in the last primetime game they were in, which was last week. So for the actual injury report for these teams, Derrick Henry's questionable. Sorry, that's Hardy. Hardy's questionable. He is, if I had to guess, probably going to play, but I wonder if he'll be limited or not. For the most part, healthy, but I'll put it this way. The defense does have a couple of depth pieces that might be out. As for the Bengals, though, to get into their injury report, they have a few more guys. Burrow hurt his wrist. He's going to play, but I do wonder how badly it is, a deal. You saw Hendrickson, who got injured, so we'll see if he ends up playing in this game because of a neck issue, so that could be a factor as well. Besides that, though, it seems like they just have a bunch of injuries on the defensive side of the ball. So with that being the case, we know Cincinnati's defense has been a mess. We know Baltimore's offense looked great last week against Buffalo. Any props you like in this game?
So basically I like just one. I like Gesicki over 22 receiving yards. The middle of the defense for Baltimore has been, where people have found success. They're second in receptions and targets after Chase. He's second in targets and receptions after Chase. He's over in 2 of 4. He's coming off his a 1 reception, 1 target game. So I think he's gonna have a bounce back. If you look at the tight end position versus Baltimore, Gray and Kelsey had 36 yards each. Bowers had 98, Ferguson had 95, Kincaid had 47. So they're having some success, and a lot of those were in negative game script, I would say. I know Bowers and Ferguson were in complete negative game script. I don't expect a complete negative game script here, but I do expect Cincinnati to try to attack the middle of the field. So I like Gesicki over 22 receiving yards.
Yeah, on that. I feel like I'm going to go for this one, I think I might actually go to Derrick Henry. I think I'm going to go with the lower 1.5 receptions. He had 3 last week, which is kind of a miracle for him, but he tends to get about 1 or 0. In fact, if you actually look at his game log, that was the first time he's had more than 1 reception since December of last year. He had 6 straight games with less than 2 receptions, and I think that 135 is a decent price. Now you're looking at the number that the Bengals allow, decent amount to running backs, but I just expect to see a decent amount of Hill in this game for the receiving portion. But I don't mind Henry. I think he had 1 insane game receiving-wise. 1 was on the goal line, stuff like that, but he had a monster game against Buffalo. I think now this price is pretty affordable. It's minus 135 on BetMGM. It's mostly minus 150 on other books, so there is a decent line differential if you shop around. I don't mind going at Henry under, especially if I think the Ravens win this game. That should result in a positive game flow for Henry to run the ball, maybe not to catch the ball, but I don't mind Henry to go under his 1.5 receptions in this game. Besides that, it's going to segue into my other play, which is Justice Hill over his receiving yards, because he has been fantastic so far this season. He has had at least 19 receiving yards in 7 of the last 9 games dating back to last season. He has had at least 21 yards in 4 of his last 5 games. He's been great, no way around it. And he had 78 last game against Buffalo. So Buffalo has been really bad against opposing running backs, but I do think you're looking at Hill, who is still a very solid piece of this offense, very underrated piece. And for that reason, I am going to back him to look pretty sharp in this game. Anything else you want to talk about?
Nope, that's all I have.
Cool. Moving on to the next game, we're going to look at a matchup between the Dolphins and the Patriots. Damn, this game's going to suck. For this game, you have the Dolphins with Huntley at quarterback, and you have the Patriots with Brissett at quarterback. If the Jets are getting killed this badly by Minnesota, you got to wonder how bad the Patriots actually are, because this defense got torched by Aaron Rodgers and company a couple weeks ago. Miami's favored by 2 for some reason, sure, and the over-under is 36.5. So, yeah, I know the main storyline for this game was Stevenson getting benched for Gibson because he keeps fumbling the ball. Now, for the actual injury report for this matchup, you are looking at Peppers being out. A couple of defensive players are banged up. Bourne's been banged up. A lot of questionable guys, though, so we'll see how many actually suit up for New England. For the injury report for the Dolphins, of course, Tua is not going to play. Once again, Tua not playing kind of destroyed this entire offense, but down a couple offensive linemen as well, so that's not going to exactly help. Fuller's been banged up as well. Mostert's been banged up as well. And we saw Phillips officially ruled out for the year. Now, the main, I'd say, breaking news for the week in a positive light was post-prime Odell Beckham Jr. is apparently going to play. But that's the only positive that Miami has injury-wise for the last couple weeks. So, yeah, Miami's defense is kind of decimated. They couldn't stop the run last week against Tennessee. The offense is a mess because Huntley can't play. Is there anything you like in this game?
Nothing at all. I have no idea what to expect on either side. I don't even want to be involved in anything. I mean, I can't even predict the game flow, what's going to happen. I wouldn't be surprised by anything in this game. So, perfect game to pass on.
Yeah, the only thing I was kind of tempted by was Huntley rushing yards, but it's at 34.5. So I don't even know if I could take that. Yeah. New England's actually been good against opposing running backs when it comes to preventing them from scrambling, but I'm sure a lot of that comes down to actual opponents. So it's kind of tough to tell if that's actually like a good defensive scheme or if they just have been matched up against the statues of the world and they haven't really had to stop anybody. Like I don't think Mason Rudolph, for example, is a guy that's going to be running that much anyway. Yeah, now, true. I see Odell's at 8.5 if you want to actually talk about it. I don't know what the snap count's going to be. I don't know why he would actually be targeted that much, just based on how bad the offense is. But you can make an argument if he ends up getting like 40% of the snaps, and maybe he'll get one target. But Huntley can't throw the ball downfield. We saw him miss Tyreek Hill on a couple of free touchdowns last week against Tennessee. I don't think it's any good. I think most people feel that way. Shout out to the Pro Bowler from a couple years ago. Joking there. But still, I think this game's a mess. Like, I'm trying to think of what I actually like in this game. Miami can't stop the run. At least they weren't able to last week. So if you actually like rushing props, maybe Gibson in this game. I still think Stevenson's going to get a decent workload, but I do have to at least point out that he has been fumbling a lot lately. And it seems like Mayo's trying to make a statement, trying to give Gibson more of an opportunity. So Stevenson's at 43.5 rushing yards. If you do want to go for Gibson, by comparison, Gibson is around for rushing 44.5. I don't mind the over on that. I think that, once again, he's not exactly a great running back. He's more of a pass catcher. But if you're looking at potential rush attempts, maybe you want to go for attempts instead in this game, if I could actually find it. His attempts are at 11.5. So they are expecting a pretty decent workload here. But Miami is allowing a bunch of production on the ground, which could result in what I think it could be a problem for this Miami defense. So I do think that Gibson might be an option if you want to go for a potential dark horse candidate to actually score a touchdown in this game. But if you want to actually mention the weather, which I forgot to do before, weather should be fine. In New England, you'd expect it to be pretty ugly, but it's actually not. Weather should be okay, so it should not be a factor in this one. Game should be ugly, though. If you want to play some Benny Hill music while the quarterbacks look like idiots out there, that's probably how you want to spend your couple hours. No touchdown in the game might be fun. Just kidding, but game should be ugly.
Yeah, that should be fun.
I'll be watching something else. See a question. Any Eric reception props?
Eric All? Yeah, I don't mind that. He's been getting a decent amount of snap shares at tight end. Yeah, I don't mind that at all. I think it should be at like 1.5, maybe one.
Yeah. I see it's 2.5 at plus 143.
Yeah, I don't hate that.
The receiving yards are at 16.5.
Yeah, I don't hate that. He's been popular in the fantasy community. I'll say that, as far as he's getting more uptick.
Yeah, honestly, if you're starting him in fantasy, that means your team's half injured, so you probably are just desperate. I wouldn't go that far to start him, but if you want to put him as a prop, I might not mind that. We know Cincinnati does love to throw the ball, So we'll see what happens there.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, moving on to the next game. I'll look at a matchup between the Browns and the Commanders. Commanders offense, randomly really, really good. Jaden Daniels favorite to win Rookie of the Year right now offensively, which he should because he's been incredible. But you are looking at the Browns, who ended up getting robbed, I'll put it that way, by the Raiders last week after the referees didn't do him any favors. No sympathy, though, because Deshaun Watson's the quarterback. For this game, though, the Commanders are 3-point favorites. The over-under is around 43.5. For the actual weather report for this game, weather should be okay for the most part. A little bit of wind, nothing substantial. Temperature should be fine. So weather will not play a factor. We know the Browns' defense was supposed to be an elite unit. So far this season, it's been fine. But the offense is so bad, it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to ask you, because we know the Commanders have been an offensive juggernaut so far this season. The Browns not so much. Anything you like in this game?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Amari Cooper over 52.5 receiving yards. Last week, he was 2 big plays away from having like a monster game. They called back the 86-yard touchdown on a phantom holding call.
That's what I'm saying. The referees didn't do him any favors.
Yeah, and then he had a drop for like 35 yards. So, yeah, he was like 2 plays away from having a monster day. He's getting a lot of the air yards for Cleveland. So whenever Deshaun Watson is throwing it deep, he's throwing it to him. Judy's kind of taking away the underneath stuff. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Njoku should be back, which will open up, some of those deep shots.
And Njoku's props, by the way, are 37.5 receiving yards.
Yeah. So I'll stay away from those because I just want to see how he looks when he comes back. But, I mean, wide receivers have been really good against Washington. Chase had 118, Neighbors 127, Godwin 83. So they've had success. And I think Cleveland should try to throw the ball a little bit more here. I mean, I know Watson hasn't been good, but I think they should try to open up the run game with, the pass game. So doing it, kind of counterintuitive. So I like Amari Cooper over 52.5, probably ladder him up to, like 75, 80.
Yeah, I'm thinking if I want to do Jerome Ford over his receiving yards or not.
Yeah, I like that.
It's at 19.5, and Washington has really not been great at actually guarding running backs out of the backfield in the pass catching role. Looking at Ford's numbers, he has had at least 25 receiving yards in 3 of his last 4. He has had at least 25 receiving yards in 5 of his last 7. And we know that he is not exactly the best running back per se, but when it comes to pass catching, he's pretty good. So I don't mind Ford to go over his receiving yards there against the Commanders. So keep that in mind. Anything else you like for this game?
That's it. That's all I have.
Cool. Moving on to the next game, we have the Colts against the Jaguars. Should be a fun one. For this one, you have Joe Flacco going up against a winless Jacksonville team because the Jaguars are about to blow up the entire coaching staff, but they don't know it yet. Colts, though, we saw Richardson got injured in the first quarter last week against the Steelers. Flacco came in, and he looked really good against a pretty solid defense. So we'll see if Flacco can look sharp against one of the worst pass defenses in the league. I'm already on Flacco on his over passing yards at around 237.5. I know a lot of people like Pittman. They like Downs. They had great games last week, but Jacksonville is allowing the second most passing yards per game in the entire league. And Jonathan Taylor is out for this game. So the ground game might not be as good as expected because I'm not a big Trey Sermon guy. Jacksonville, though, defensively, once again, has been a mess, so nothing to really report there. Anything you like in this game, or is it just Indianapolis will just have a lot of passing yards and a lot of passing touchdowns?
Man, I like a bunch in this game just because we're low on time. I'll go with, so I like Christian Kirk over 20.5. Longest reception.
That's kind of an auto play every week.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if you just look at what Indy's allowed, they've allowed like over 4 receivers to have, 30-plus yard catches. Their pass defense has been atrocious. I think this is a get-right spot for the Jacksonville offense. So I think Trevor Lawrence is going to have a big day. I think the pass catchers are going to have a big day. So I like Christian Kirk over 20.5, longest reception. One of my favorite plays on the slate, Brian Thomas Jr. over 53.5 receiving yards, minus 115-ish. Indy's allowed 100-plus yard receiver in back-to-back games and 3 of the 4. He's over in 2 of 4, but the volume's been outstanding. I mean, he's got 18 targets in his last 2 games. So I thought Evan Ingram was going to come back, but I think he's just 1 week away. So I think they're going to hold him out again. So that's even more targets for Brian Thomas. So I think Brian Thomas is good with a ladder all the way up to 100 yards. I think he has a monster day.
I think it should feature a lot of points. I like the over in the game. Now, I will point out the weather's not supposed to be great, but it's classic Florida weather. It's supposed to be rain. You don't know how long it's going to rain, so it might be some on and off showers there. We'll see what happens, but point is there might be some rain in the game, so just keep that in mind. But I just see a bunch of points. Yep. I don't trust either defense. I know the Colts' run defense has been a mess for most of the season, better lately, but the Jaguars' passing defense is a mess. And Flacco actually faced off against them last year with Cleveland, and he had 311. So I can see Flacco having a solid game. Don't mind Pittman or Downs to have monster games too.
Yeah, me either.
So that's kind of my expectation for this matchup. Moving on to the next game, you have the Bills against the Texans, another solid game that could be a primetime game. For this one, you are looking at the spread being close. The Texans are -1. Bills are once again trying to respond after getting killed against the Ravens last week, and the over-under is around 47.5. Injury report for the Bills, it is not pretty. To get into it, they're missing a bunch of guys on the defensive side of the ball. Oliver's going to be out. They're missing a couple other options there. As I'm trying to remember, did Milano come back, or is he officially not back yet?
I don't think he's came back yet.
I don't think he did either. But I want to just quickly check. But the point is their defense is still in shambles, so we'll see what happens. But for the sake of, he's on IR, so we'll see what happens. But he said he was designated to return on Tuesday, so I don't know if he's going to play in this game, so just keep that in mind. Point is, though, you're looking at a Bills defense that's probably a bit overrated, and you're looking at the Texans, who offensively have been fine this season, not as good as maybe we expected stats-wise, but we know that Stroud is still a top-tier quarterback, and they have a couple injuries, though. Dell got injured. We'll see what his story is. A couple offensive linemen are a bit banged up, but besides that, should be okay. Of course, Tunsil, though, is injured, which is a pretty big deal. So I'm going to ask you, Joe Mixon's out again. I feel like he's been injured for most of the season. Any props you like in this game?
Yeah, so I like 3, but I'll just give them in like smaller form just so I don't have to go in depth. But I think they're all correlated. So if you just let's start with James Cook under 59.5 rushing yards. He's under in back-to-back games. Touches have decreased in week 1. If you just look, Ray Davis has been getting a decent amount of carries. Now, game script has kind of been a flow in there that we're getting blown out last week. So that kind of played a part. But still, James Cook wasn't effective early on. Houston's really, really good versus running back ones. Outside of Aaron Jones, he shut everything else down. Swift had 18, ETN had 11, Taylor had 48. The thing that they struggle with is pass catching backs. So I think James Cook will be more involved in the pass game. So I'll take his over on his receiving yards. I don't have a number. I didn't write it down, but that's what I'm taking. Do you have a number for receiving yards? I'm guessing it'll be like 20 and a half, James Cook.
Yeah. So I had Cook receptions last week. I don't want to talk about it. But for the extra receiving yards is 20.5.
Yeah, so I thought it would be. Yeah, so I like that over. I like his rushing yards under, and we're gonna go with Josh Allen over 31.5 pass attempts because they can't run the ball. Well, not them per se, but because teams haven't been able to run the ball. I mean, the quarterbacks have been throwing. Every quarterback has had 30+ attempts versus Houston. I think that's where you would want to attack them and not up front with that front seven. So I think all three of those are correlated. So I'll take those. Houston side, I mean, obviously Stephon Diggs is going to be the big, revenge narrative thing. I mean, I can see it. I'm just not betting it, but I can definitely understand it. I mean, Nico Collins has been a monster. I think Tank Dell is back. So I'll be interested to see how this plays out. But I like those 3 props on the Buffalo side. I'll just stay away from the Houston side.
Yeah, so I do want to point out that Diggs, of course, has the revenge game spot, which I'm sure is the most talked about angle that people are going to be using. So, yes, that is definitely going to be a thing for the sake of this matchup. I'm not sure if it's going to play a factor or not, but I am at least going to throw it out there that it does seem like there is a lot of people that are blindly picking Diggs to have a monster game. I don't know if I'm picking him to have a great game for the entirety, but I don't mind him early. I know that FanDuel does have a first quarter receiving yards prop market, which I might find a bit appealing. I think they might get Diggs going early, and then after that, maybe he'll regress back into being kind of an afterthought a bit, because I'm sure we all thought Diggs would have a bigger role with this team, and it really just hasn't been that way. His first quarter receiving yards are at 7.5.
Yeah.
That feels very low at -122 for a guy you're expecting that, and at least for the first drive, they might be targeting a little bit extra just to maybe get him going early. So I don't mind Diggs to go over 7.5 first quarter receiving yards for this matchup. Besides that, though, Dell, you said, is going to play. I wonder how healthy he's going to be, though, because a chest injury isn't exactly something that is easy to play through. So we'll see if he's going to be limited a bit in terms of snaps. But I think Diggs in a pretty good spot to at least be good for a quarter. Then after that, maybe things don't exactly work out. Plus, Buffalo's pass defense has not exactly been great. I'm moving on to the next game. You have the Raiders taking on the Broncos. Yeah, I'm going to be straightforward here. I can go through injury reports. I can go through the weather. But this game does look pretty ugly because I don't really like either offense. Is there anything you like in this game?
Yeah, 2 things. I like Gardner Minshew under 189.5 passing yards. Denver's
Once again,
allowed
his passing yards are 189.5, so I'm kind of skipping some I'd say introductions for this game.
Yeah,
That's
it's all good.
disgusting.
It's all
That's
good.
disgusting.
Denver's only allowed one quarterback to go over this number. That was Aaron Rodgers last week. And ironically, it was in like a rainstorm. So I think that was off sheer volume and then maybe a couple of breakups here and there.
They also couldn't move the ball offensively. So there were a lot of snaps that the Jets offense
and just to keep this in mind, they shut down Tampa, and Tampa was in a negative game script. I think they were down 21-0. So the game script was in their favor, and they still couldn't get over that. They limited Geno in game one on the road. And you've seen what Geno's been doing the last few weeks. So I think that's pretty big. He's over in 3 of the last 4, but I mean, I think negative game script helped him with that. They were down big in the Baltimore game. I think they were down big in another game as well. So that kind of helped them. So I'm going under 189.5 passing yards for him. Yeah, that's all I had. I was going to go Javonte Williams over 52, but I'll step away from that.
Yeah, I just think this game's disgusting. Like, I'm trying to think if there's anybody I'm tempted by. I know that Zamir White's banged up, so a lot of people like Madison. I don't think Madison's a good player, so I'll go with the under on his 74.5 rushing and receiving. I get the workload is going to be there. Denver's defense is filthy. I feel like people recognize it's a pretty good unit, but they don't realize how good of a unit it actually is. Like, Bo Nix has multiple wins this season, and he's been terrible in most of these games. He was good against Tampa because he ran a lot, but against the Jets, he had negative passing yards at the half, and they still won because the defense is very good. I don't think Madison's a good player. Madison's gone under this number in 9 straight games. Yes, a big reason for that is his role because he was a backup for a couple teams. But do you think Madison's a good player? Because I don't.
I think he was better as a secondary option, like when he was with Aaron Jones.
He's not a starter.
Yeah, no, I don't think he's a starter. But I think his upside is out of the backfield receiving, and I think a lot of checkdowns. So I can see why you're going under that. If I had to do anything, I would go under his rushing yards over his receiving yards.
Well, you said Aaron Jones. I think you meant Dalvin Cook.
Dalvin Cook, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm thinking about the now. Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Point is that he was always a backup running back who'd occasionally start, and maybe he was a bit okay. But Denver's defense is really good. I'll go with Madison unders because I don't think Madison's that good. I'm moving on, though, to the next game. Looking at a matchup between the Cardinals and the Niners. The Niners are laying 7. The over-under is 48.5, and the Cardinals, once again, are trying to figure out their defense. Hire a defensive-minded head coach, and your defense can't stop anybody. Probably not a good sign, but they gave up 40-plus points to Commanders last week. Main reason, they could not stop the run to save their lives. I'm expecting Jordan Mason to have a monster game. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, you know what? I think that's fair. I think Brock Purdy's going to have a monster game as well. I mean, I understand, like, the passing numbers.
I don't trust the Cardinals to stop anybody. The defense is terrible.
Yeah, I agree to that. That's why I'm just scaling it down to maybe like a third of a unit on Brock Purdy over 252.5 passing yards, because I can see your avenue where they could just run the ball, 30, 35 times and get out of there. We saw what Detroit was able to do on the ground, even to a lesser extent whenever they were playing Buffalo. I think James Cook had a pretty decent game. So they weren't allowing teams to, offenses weren't really throwing the ball because they could just run. But I think Brock Purdy is going to have a good game here. I mean, he had 283 and 242 in last year's matchup. He's had 280 plus in 2 of his last 3. He's getting his weapons back. So maybe Kyle wants to kind of spread out the offense and make them defend multiple sets. So I'm going over 252.5 passing yards. If you just look at, Brock Purdy's sneaky MVP candidate. I'll leave that there. Sneaky MVP candidate.
Yeah, definitely true if the Niners can hold on because all of his weapons have gotten injured. So definitely is going to play a factor if the Niners once again wake up and win like 11 games. So we'll see what happens there. For this one, I just think the Niners should win this game comfortably because I don't trust Arizona to stop anybody. I can see points because I don't think the Niners defense is that great either. I mean, we saw them beat the Patriots. I know Fred Warner's banged up, so we'll see what his story is. But for this game, I think I'm just expecting Kyler to throw a pick in this matchup. I just expect, once again, the Niners to be up. I think that Kyler's going to have to play from behind. And I know he's done a good job handling the ball recently. But in the head-to-head, he did throw 2 picks against the Niners last year. And I do think that the interception price is decent. It's at minus 114. I think I like it. I think the Niners can stop the run. I think that they can, once again, force the Cardinals to play from behind. And I just think Kyler eventually is going to have to force some stuff late. I don't mind sack props, though, because I don't think that Arizona can really block people. So I don't mind Bosa to have a game potentially on the blocks. If you want to go for somebody else, that could be an option too. But I see a lot of pressure. Seems to be how the Niners always beat this team. They just dominate in the trenches, and the Cardinals have no answers. I kind of see the same script here. I think Kyler is going to be running for his life, so I don't mind sacks, but I also don't mind an interception for Kyler at -114. Moving on to the next game. Looking at a matchup between, just going in order here according to ESPN. Next game is the Packers against the Rams. Now, the Packers are favored by 3 despite having no receivers at all. The over-under is around 48.5. A reminder, Christian Watson's out, and they suspended Dobbs for ditching practice. So, talking about practice. But the point is, the Packers are going to be relying heavily on the likes of Reed and Wicks to be their main receivers. Also, they have Kraft in the tight end spot. The Rams' defense has been terrible, but they have been relying heavily on Stafford, and Kyron does have the longest touchdown streak in the entire league, as he scored in, I forgot how many games in a row, like 8 games in a row or something crazy.
Yeah.
So he's been great in general. For this matchup, I feel like the obvious move is to just fade the Rams' pass defense and to take Wicks or Reed or both. But I'm going to ask you, what do you like in this game?
Yeah, so man, I like a ton in this game. I'll just rapid fire. I like Wicks over 4.5 receptions. That's at plus money. Obviously you just ran down no Dobbs, no Watson, no Musgrave, and the volume has been there. Him and Reed are gonna pretty much attack that secondary of the Rams. The Rams are really bad in the secondary. They got a lot of defensive holdings, a lot of pass interferences. I think Wicks is going to be a target monster here, so I'll take him over 4.5 receptions. I don't want to deal with the yardage, but I wouldn't, I can't fault you for doing that. We're also going to go with Kyron Williams over 102.5 rushing and receiving yards. That's at -115. 3 out of 4 RB1s have, not only gone over this number, but they've hammered it. They went over it. So I think Williams will be able to go over this. He's been over in back-to-back games. The volume's been there. It's increased as he's progressed through the season. I expect a heavy dose of him, and the Rams kind of control the tempo and keep the ball on the ground, maybe some check downs and stuff to him. So that's 2. And, of course, man, I like Josh Carty over 1.5 field goals made. He's over in 3 of his last. Yeah, he's over in 3 or 4. He's only missed 1 kick all year. He's got range. I think he's hit from multi-different angle, 45, 52, 36. So he's, knocking off all the yardage marks. The one he missed was in, Arizona blowout. Like he could have went 4 for 4, but it was a blowout, so they weren't really kicking the ball. Offense moves the ball from 20 to 20 as far as the Rams. But when they get in the red zone, if you saw that game last week against Chicago, they were in the red zone consistently, and just couldn't score. So I think
to be fair, they have no weapons because, of course, Puka and Cup are both injured. So
right.
I don't know what.
But they're still moving the ball with ease. They're still moving the ball with ease and getting down the field. It's just when the field shrinks, they're kind of to your point, they don't have Cup to route somebody up, or they don't have Puka to kind of do the same thing on the other side. So I like Josh Carty over 1.5 field goals made. I think he'll take advantage of them stalling out a few times in the end zone.
Yeah,
in the red zone.
This also might be a Stafford interception game. Of course, I do like the props that we talked about before with Wicks and with Reed. I think they'll have solid games. The fact that the Packers are favored in this game, despite having 2 of their main receivers suspended, is kind of wild.
And it's tight end.
And the game's also in LA. I know that LA doesn't really get great amounts of fans, and Green Bay travels well, so there might be a sea of green in this game. But I do think the Packers being favored tells you that the Packers probably win this game. So that might be a factor. But I think Green Bay is going to force a pick because I believe they're currently leading the league in interceptions per game. So Stafford's a -128. He threw a pick last week against Chicago. I can see that happening again. Don't mind Stafford in reception, throwing to a couple of underwhelming receiving options if this team does fall behind early. But I like Wicks. I like Reed, usual guys, etc. Moving on to the next game in the slate. For the next one, I'm going to look at a matchup between the Giants and the Seahawks. Of course, Neighbors has a concussion and Singletary's out. So if you like Wando Robinson receiving props, might be your game. Not the yards, but the receptions. He might end up with 8 catches for 40 yards. So just keep that in mind for this game. But the Giants have really nothing that's worth a damn in the receiving core, unless you think that without Neighbors, maybe Slayton steps up or they remember that Hyatt exists, because he's been on this team and they don't use him. As for the Seahawks, we know that the defense has been kind of banged up. They got torched by the Lions. Goff didn't have an incompletion. But, of course, that's Jared Goff and the Lions, who are much better than this Giants team. For this matchup, though, is there anything you actually like? Because with Neighbors being out, I can't really trust the Giants to do anything besides to force feed Wandell a bunch of targets inside 5 yards of the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, I mean that's always that's going to be popular for sure. If you want to ladder his receptions up to like 10, I think you can get
Once
a
again,
nice,
not the yards, just the receptions.
yeah, you can get a nice price on that. I would look at Darius Slayton longest reception over. He's been a deep shot since he was on the team. So if you want to take a look at that, but the two that I like are going to be on the Seattle side. I like Noah Fant over 21.5 receiving yards. That's at -112. He's had two for 24, 6 for 60, 1 for 14, 2 for 11. So kind of up and down. There's two things that the Giants can't do. They can't guard tight ends. They can't guard running backs out of the backfield. We'll get to that in a second. Ferguson 6 for 49. Akins 4 for 29. Ertz 4 for 62. Naylor, which is a backup tight end, is 2 for 27 versus the Giants. So every tight end has went over that they played. I don't see anything changing here. I think it'll be an emphasis on the middle of the field. And also they can't cover back. So I like Zach Charbonnet over 13.5 receiving yards. I know Kenneth Walker's back, but Zach found a way to produce and mostly as a receiver. Last week he had 5 receptions on 5 targets for 49 yards, and he's exceeded this number in every single game. In fact, he's had 25 plus in 3 of the last 4. Tight ends have exceeded this number in every game versus the Giants. He has 25 plus in 3 of the 4. And I mentioned the struggles for the Giants versus running backs out of the backfield. And if you want to just go into depth, Eckler had 47, Dowdle had 15, Ford had 33, Aaron Jones had 15. I mean, I think Zach has similar success here. So those are the two that I like.
Yeah, I'm gonna go to a prop actually involving Daniel Jones because Neighbors is out. I like the under on the longest. I like the under on the longest completion.
Okay,
at 31.5.
Yeah.
He went over against the Cowboys because you might remember they blew a coverage on the first drive of the game, and Neighbors was wide open by about 40 yards, and he ended up with 39. Should have been a touchdown. But Daniel Jones watching that Cowboys game, he can't throw the ball deep. I know we make jokes about like Deshaun Watson and his accuracy issues downfield. Jones just has a noodle arm. He can't throw downfield. Like watching him play against the Cowboys, he missed so many opportunities with Slayton down the seam. I just feel like he can't throw.
Yeah,
and I feel like the Giants offense
in 2 years.
The Giants offense knows it because a lot of the game plan is get the ball out as quickly as possible. So I feel like the offense is really promoting a lot of check down dump off stuff like we saw against the Cowboys. And they did have a lot of passing yards in the end. They kicked a bunch of field goals. They couldn't score a touchdown, but the point is they were able to move the ball. I like the under. Jones had gone under this longest completion prop in 7 straight games prior to last week, and that was once again because of a blown coverage on the first drive of the game. But with Neighbors being out, they don't have many deep threats. You mentioned Slayton. The chemistry has been off this season for whatever reason. They just can't connect late, or I should say deep downfield. Give me Daniel Jones, a longest completion under. Seattle's been good against the pass with the exception of last week against Detroit, and we know Detroit has a lot of weapons. So I'll fade Daniel Jones here. Give me a lot of check down BS, West Coast extreme offensive stuff where he's just checking the ball down 5 yards the line of scrimmage every time. I'll go with the under on his longest completion of 31.5. Moving on to the next game. This is the, I'd say, primetime game portion. Do you do the Monday night game too or just the Sunday night game?
No, just Sunday night.
Cool. So the last game on the slate, you have the Cowboys and the Steelers. For this one, the entire Cowboys defense is injured. Parsons is out. Lawrence is also dead. And Diggs is questionable. Besides that, though, they're fine. You're looking at the Steelers. They're off a loss to the Colts. The defense kind of got torched by Joe Flacco. So the argument is maybe the Cowboys can do something offensively. They can't run the ball. We know this. But Dak's stats this season have been fine. They haven't been winning many games. But I think the Steelers just run the ball down their damn throats. Like, I don't know how the Cowboys are going to stop the run. They've been bad against the run all year. They were very good against the Giants. But the Giants also didn't really have any good running backs, and we saw Singletary get injured pretty early on in that game in the first place. Tried to use Tracy, who was not very good, so the Cowboys' defense looked good for one game against the run. But no Parsons, no Lawrence. I think Justin Fields actually plays well. Now, the weather's not supposed to be great. I have to always mention this, because you're looking at the weather in what used to be Heinz Field. It's not called Heinz Field anymore, right?
No, I forgot what it's called.
It's Heinz Field to me, damn it.
Always.
For the weather, it's supposed to rain, so at least early on, then it's supposed to clear up late. Wind should be about 10 miles an hour, so nothing that extreme, but there might be rain early in the game. The Cowboys, for a long time, have been really bad at stopping mobile quarterbacks, and we saw Lamar and the Ravens offense torch this team a couple weeks ago. Give me Justin Fields rushing yards. I think it's a great spot. I don't mind anytime touchdown for this game. But the backfield's a bit banged up. Maybe Najee gets going. But I really think Fields is going to give the Cowboys defense a lot of headaches. Give me Justin Fields to have a solid game here with the ground. I think you're looking at his rushing yards being in the mid-40s, I believe. I think it's a great spot for Fields to have a solid game. And I'm not a big Justin Fields guy, but I am starting him in fantasy. Like, I think it's that good of a matchup. You're looking at his rushing yards being around, just quickly trying to pull it up, 49.5. He has gone over in 3 of the last 5, and his rushing attempts are at 9.5. I like the over on those. I know the attempts have been kind of limited this season, but I think the bad weather is going to help. So I am going to go with Fields to go over, and Fields touchdown this game's plus 150. I don't mind that. He had 2 last week, 1 the week prior. I think he gets in the end zone at least once. But with the Cowboys' defensive issue, especially in the line of scrimmage with Parsons and with Lawrence being out, and they can't stop the run anyway, I just think they run it down their throats. I'll go with Fields and probably Najee to both have a pretty solid game.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you had something in this game. I got nothing. This is similar to I know it's bigger brands, bigger names, but it's similar to the New England Miami game for me. I mean, I can see it going a bevy of different ways. I definitely agree with your Fields take, your Najee take, because Dallas has been bad. But I kind of can maybe see, Dak having some success through the air if they can kind of protect him.
Mm-hmm. I'm hoping the bad weather in Hines plays a factor. So,
yeah, because they can't run the ball, so they probably just won't even try. I mean, I wouldn't even try to run into that front.
They're going to try occasionally with Elliott for like 3 yards of carry, and then they're just going to give up.
Yeah, but I don't see a lot to like in this game. I wouldn't be surprised with any of the outcomes. I wouldn't be surprised at anything. Maybe you
Pickens like Dak interception in this game, maybe.
Yeah, I can see that. I wish you could bet him like strip sack. Like, can you bet? I wish you could bet strip sacks, because I would definitely bet that TJ Watt has a strip sack on.
I mean, if you think he gets a strip sack, then maybe you just want to bet defensive touchdown in the game, because that just might be an opportunity for you. But fair. Watt, by the way, if you want to go for Watt's sack in this game, over a quarter of a sack is available at around. Sorry, just trying to find the exact number. Minus 205. So yeah, have fun with that one. If you want 1.5 sacks, can I interest you in even money? So yeah, there's no value at all on Watt.
Zero.
If you want to go for somebody else in that game, you might want to go for the opposite side. Maybe they double or chip on Watt, and that kind of leaves some opportunities for the other side of the line of scrimmage. That could be an option too.
Yeah, that's fair.
But quickly pulling up the sack props there. Anything else you want to add before this?
No, that's it, man. I think this is honestly, you know what? I think this is going to be a decent game. I really do. I think it'll be a low scoring, low possession, probably like a 1975 type of game. Run the ball, field goals, like a 1970.
You mean 17? Oh, you mean from the year? Okay,
yeah.
I thought you said the score was going to be 19-75, and I was like, "What the hell are we talking about?"
Okay, no, like a 1975, the year.
You could just say Iowa football, and we know what you mean.
So. Hey, Iowa, man. Well, I mean, this.
Yeah, how'd they do last? Yeah, what they have 0 points at half again against Ohio State?
Yeah. But yeah, I think it'll be a decent game for the nightcap. Definitely two of the bigger fan bases in the NFL. That's for sure.
Definitely true. I actually expect to see a decent amount of terrible towels in Jerry World for this game. Anyway, that's going to wrap it up for all the games for the actual Sunday slate. Now, I know that I'm sure Munaf has a bit of a different format, tends to, I'm sure, cover some touchdown scores in each game. For the baseball show, we do our home run picks at the end of the show. I was going to save touchdown score for the end. Lonte, pick your favorite touchdown score in the games.
Favorite touchdown scorer. Let's go Brian Thomas Jr.
Okay.
That's my favorite one. He should be, I think that should be like around 170.
I'm going to quickly check right now. We'll set the cup at plus 140 because that's kind of what we do on other shows. So yeah, I think that's going to reach the threshold. His touchdown for this game is available at, I see plus 195 on FanDuel.
Oh, even better. Yeah, I loved it. Almost 2-1. Yeah. I think Brian Thomas has a monster game.
Yeah, for me, I thought about maybe going with one of the Colts receivers because I do think that they're going to torch the secondary.
I agree.
But I got to see what the price is because I don't know if it's going to be that appealing to me because Pittman I feel like is going to be pretty cheap. So I don't know if I actually want to go with Pittman. Thought about Downs, but I don't know if he's more of – I know he had a touchdown last week, but he's more of like a larger
possession receiver
guy. He's a possession
receiver. Yeah.
I mean, Pittman touchdowns plus 210. He hasn't had a touchdown in 8 straight games, but – we saw him get 2 red zone targets against Pittsburgh last week against the Jaguars. He did have a touchdown in one of the 2 games last year, and they can't stop the pass. I'll take it. Thought about Fields at plus 150, which I don't mind, but give me Pittman at plus 210. I think it's a very good game for the Colts receiving core, so I'm going to go with that angle as my home run, as my home run dash touchdown prop for this one. Anyway, Lonte, anything else you want to add for the Sunday slate?
That's it, man. That's it.
Yep. Thanks for tuning in. As the guest host, hopefully I didn't mess that up too badly. Point is, though, in and out in about 45 minutes. Hopefully you enjoyed the show. A reminder, check out the Propcast with Munaf a couple times a week. And a reminder, you can find me on the MLB show, WNBA show, NBA show as well, tennis show, which I do solo. Find me on Twitter at Reichel Radio. And a reminder, you can find Lonte on a couple of those same shows, the NBA show as well. Find him on the MLB show. You can find his articles on the SGPN website. And you can find him on Twitter at XXLonteXX. Till next time, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.